This is Partners in Crime with Adam Croft and Robert Daws.
Hello, happy Friday. Welcome to another episode of Partners in Crime, episode 91. Mr. Robert Daws.
Oh, you're talking to me? Oh, hello. Yes, hello, Adam. How are you? Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. Happy Fridays, that's a group, isn't it?
Happy Mondays.
Oh, happy Mondays.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. We were just talking,
Finger
actually.
on the pulse, as usual.
We were just talking about next Friday, weren't we? And whether we're going to do a live episode.
Yes, we were talking about whether we do a live episode, and we've come to a conclusion.
Yes, to celebrate our second birthday, we have decided that we can't be bothered. And,
well, that's not strictly true.
It's not strictly true. We are going to hold it back because we realise this is episode 91. We're going to hold back our big bonanza for episode 100, which is coming up shortly. Is near enough to our birthday as well, and also celebrates the end of your tour and various other things.
I'm suddenly available for Panto again. You'll have finished this latest book. And that'll be away, and you'll be halfway through your next one by then, I would have thought.
Probably finished it, I imagine, yeah.
We've just been talking about the iron discipline that Mr. Croft here exhibits in his work. It's quite phenomenal. It's he works very, 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 very hard, don't you?
Which is why we haven't had the time to sort out a live episode for next week.
Well, exactly. But you know, I admire your discipline, sir.
I will explain. I did write yesterday nearly 9,000 words, 8,500 words the day before, and I need 5,000 today and another 5,000 tomorrow. So yes, time is not something I have great swathes of right now.
But you do see, but some people would say, well, you know, how can you be a creative writer and think in terms of numbers? You know, is it never mind the quality, feel the width? And you know, I've asked you this before, and that's not the case with you because you are incredibly thorough. You know, and then you have your team of editors and people who look at everything you do. So it's not. I mean, there's some people just now I've got to do 9,000. I can't imagine doing 9,000 words in a day. Not good words anyway.
I've been doing it for over a decade now, so I'm getting used to it. I'm getting the hang of it now.
Oh, it's that sort of airline pilot. If you've done 10,000 hours or something, you make it. But anyway, the point I was making is,
I think I've done 10,000 hours this week.
Iron discipline. You know, I certainly don't have it anywhere near. Well, I do in my day job, or night job as it is at the moment. But I don't so much as a writer. Well,
someone who is going to have more time in his hands, getting straight into the news because we do have loads to cover this week. Look at all these stories I've got. One thing that came up in the news this week that we can't really avoid, possibly the biggest crime fiction story of the year, the year of course being 3 weeks old, but we'll look past that one, is the fact that Lee Child is stepping back from writing his Jack Reacher books and handing the series over to his brother, who I believe is having to change his name in order to do so. He writes, of course, as Andrew Grant, which is his brother's real name.
Yes.
Lee Child's real name being Jim Grant. And I think Andrew Grant is having to change his name to Andrew Child. I think I read somewhere.
Yes, I did too. Yes. I think that is official.
He apparently Lee Child has been searching for a way to kill off Jack Reacher for years, but ultimately decided his fans deserve to see him live on in books, which will now be written by his brother. This is according to The Guardian. Andrew Grant is actually an established author in his own right as well, quite a successful thriller writer. So he knows his onions.
Well, I mean, that's extraordinary because, I mean, this time last week, I was droning on about, people picking up the terrible word franchise was used, but a successful series with successful characters. And I was saying that, a lot of successful writers have their works picked up by publishers and approach a leading actor of the time. So you've got Sherlock Holmes being done by other writers. You have Poirot, of course. You have Jeeves and Wooster with Sebastian Faulks and what have you. And I said, there seems to be a distance of time between that's happening. Well, of course, I was talking to someone else the other day and they said, well, that didn't happen with Ian Fleming and James Bond. He stopped writing them and someone else else picked up and did the next 20 odd James Bond books. And immediately after that conversation, which just shows listeners that I know absolutely nothing, this story
shows
comes
how
out.
far our reach spreads.
Oh.
I reckon Lee Child must have been listening to Partners in Crime, and maybe we nudged him over the precipice there.
Over the weekend, he thought about it Saturday morning.
He ruminated on it.
Phoned up his brother Saturday afternoon.
Yeah.
They had a little chat on Sunday about the mechanics of it. And
Said
then,
Bob Dawes reckons we should do this.
yeah.
Hello, Lee.
Oh, God, wouldn't that be nice?
There we are.
Unlikely, I think. This is why we write fiction. But anyway, it's fascinating and great for lovers of Leacher, well, the Jack Reacher books. So that's going to be very interesting to see how that has. But Alison Flood writes that not every crime writer thinks this way. Jo Nesbø recently told me there was no way his own super tough detective Harry Hole would continue after his death. We mentioned that last week. The late Italian detective novelist Andrea Camilleri also had an end in sight for Inspector Montalbano, writing the final novel in the series 14 years ago and keeping it in his publisher's offices in Palermo. When I get fed up with him or I'm not able to write any more, I'll tell the publisher, publish that book. Sherlock Holmes was recovered, but it will not be possible to recover Montalbano. In that last book, he's really finished. That's what Camilleri said in 2012. So, by publicly making clear his plans for Reacher, Child hopes to keep his legions of fans happy with many, many more Reacher stories written by a man he describes as me 15 years ago, full of energy and ideas.
Well, I'm glad you said Jo Nesbø. We talked about him last week, and in fact, he doesn't want anybody to take on Harry Hole after he finishes writing him. And we had a message, actually, from Dharma Kelleher earlier this week, who said, I've been listening to the podcast since almost the beginning, and I love every episode. Both of you are brilliant. Just wanted to add that little bit in. That's not really relevant to the message, but
I can actually see the message, so this is not Croft making it up.
No.
Thank you very much, Dharma.
I thought I would read that bit out. It's totally irrelevant, but, ego boost and all of that.
It's like listening to Radio 2 when they say, anyway, here was some from Doncaster saying, I love the show.
Well, Dharma does love the show and says, I did want to point out that Jo Nesbø's name is pronounced Jo Nesbø. I mispronounced it for years too. We're not the only Wallies around. I only learned the correct pronunciation at a writers' conference with several Scandinavian crime writers leading panels. Again, I love the show. Keep up the great work.
Well, that's very useful. Jo Nesbø.
There we go.
But with a sort of, obviously, a Scandinavian.
I think it's probably easiest if we just never talk about Jo Nesbø or Jo Nesbø again. Actually.
No, so the black hole, the Harry Hole books will go into a black hole at the end of.
They will.
At the end of his life. Well, there we are. Fine.
On a lighter
bit like
note,
40 Towers. Yeah. Just don't, a bit like The Office. Just stop when you're on top.
Yes, and somebody who perhaps should have done that. I was reading in the Huddersfield Examiner this week, which I always read from cover to cover.
Well, you
every
do.
week.
I often see it lying around the house.
Yep.
I think that's marvellous of you.
Something I was aware of, but had forgotten about, perhaps wiped from my memory, is that Steve Bruce, ex-Manchester United footballer and now Premier League manager, while he was briefly managing Huddersfield Town in 1999 and 2000, tried his hand as an author of crime fiction. I was aware of this. I think I'd wiped it. It says here in the Huddersfield Examiner, the resulting novels Striker, Sweeper and Defender, all with exclamation marks at the end.
Yes, I can see what he was doing there.
Published on the Huddersfield-based Paragon Press imprint, became a laughing stock.
Oh.
The works of fiction star, similarly named Steve Barnes, not Steve Bruce, but Steve Barnes, who manages Leadersfield Town, not Huddersfield Town.
Leadersfield, did you say?
Yes, not Steve Bruce from Huddersfield Town. It's not about
That's
him
not the Scandinavian pronunciation of Huddersfield.
I don't know, possibly.
Leadersfield.
But it's not about Steve Bruce, it's about Steve Barnes, and it's not about Huddersfield Town, it's about Leadersfield Town.
God, I'm so with you at this point.
Or apparently, it says here, Leadersford Town, depending on which page you're reading, solves mysteries and thwarts terrorists. Striker, for example, is described by one Amazon reviewer as one of the most poorly written books I've ever read. That, although not intentionally, is a hilarious read. Even the covers, it says here, the Huddersfield Examiner's words, not mine, which look as though they were knocked together in 10 minutes on Microsoft Paint, will have you giggling. Nevertheless, these books have acquired a cult status, featuring on the popular Quickly Kevin football podcast, and have become collector's items of sorts. And one Amazon Marketplace seller is willing to part with his copy of Striker, ! Original RRP £5.50 for £1,000.
Goodness gracious.
So, yeah, apparently there is money to be made in writing dreadful crime fiction.
Absolute crap.
Which is good for us, isn't it?
Well, yeah, just as well for us. Oh, well, for me.
Yeah.
For you.
So, there we go.
Well, that's fascinating.
If you want to read those, then fill your boots.
Well, yeah, well, that's it. You see, it's very difficult because obviously he's got two jobs. He's in football and he's football manager.
And he's clearly put the time into one rather than the other, according to that article.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, well, that's fascinating. I will avoid those books at all costs. I don't think I'll be able to afford to buy one by the sounds of it.
I did look, actually, and try to find a copy on eBay when I first heard this story a while back from a friend of mine. And, yeah, I couldn't actually get hold of a copy, so the fact that the second-hand ones might well sell for £1,000 now is perhaps not unreasonable.
Well, all that thing on buying these books, I mean, I had I think I told you, but a lady come up to me when I was
no, you didn't.
No, I did. And she came up to me when I was just about to give a talk. And she said, "I couldn't find your book." She said, "I bought your novella." I said, "Oh, thank you very much indeed." She said, "It cost me £35.50." I went, "What?" She said, "Yes, it's the only one I could find." I thought, oh, for goodness sake, you feel so guilty.
You got 500 in your garage.
Until, actually, of course, it's paid into your account, and then it's amazing how the guilt just sort of just disappears. Anyway, overall, absolutely fascinating.
The thing is, that would have been a second-hand copy as well, and you won't have got a penny of that.
No. Oh, I see.
So somebody has probably bought it for £5 when it was out, waited for it to go out of print, and then gone, here we are, £35, thank you very much, and they pocketed the £30.
You know how to depress a boy.
Yeah.
Oh, well, there we go, we go. Well, poor her, and actually, subsequently, poor me too. Right, well, anyway, I was given a book, a few months ago now, called The Outsider, by Stephen King. This will be ringing loud bells for many listeners, I'm sure. Which I read. I'm not up on as much Stephen King as I would like. When I do read his books, I think they're extraordinary and absolutely brilliant. And this one, I really did catch my imagination. But I don't usually go into the sort of supernatural horror side of crime detection, but this certainly was a fantastic read, and it is available on a certain platform called Kobo. But I'll just read you the basic plot. The Outsider by Stephen King. An 11-year-old boy's violated corpse is discovered in a town park. Eyewitnesses and fingerprints point unmistakably to one of Flint City's most popular citizens. Terry Maitland, Little League coach, English teacher, husband and father of 2 girls. Detective Ralph Anderson, whose son Maitland once coached, orders a quick and very public arrest. Maitland has an alibi, but Anderson and the district attorney soon have DNA evidence to go with the fingerprints and witnesses. Their case seems ironclad. As the investigation expands and horrifying details begin to emerge, King's story kicks into high gear, generating strong tension and almost unbearable suspense. Terry Maitland seems like a nice guy, but is he wearing another face? When the answers come, it will shock you as only Stephen King can. Well, it's a terrific read. It's a wonderful read, and made all the more interesting for me this week because, of course, it has been turned into an HBO television series. So I was rather keen to see.
With a lead actor who looks a little bit like Stephen King from a strange angle, though.
Yeah, from a strange angle. But it's... and I've seen the first 2 episodes. It's terrific. Wonderful. I mean, incredible production standards, brilliant acting, and even though I know what's happened, it's done in different ways, as adaptations very often are, and whatever, and it's different enough to make it interesting, even though I know the story. So, who writes this? This is Alan Sweeting, extraordinary, wonderful, very talented Alan Sweeting, writes this: The Outsider, Sky Atlantic Review, Double Trouble in Small Town, Georgia. Stephen King's novels have generated an impressive lineage of successful adaptations. This HBO treatment of his 2018 novel The Outsider, developed by Richard Price and featuring screenwriting input from Dennis Lehane, is shaping up as one of the best TV incarnations. If the first 2 episodes established an atmosphere of pervasive horror and dread, this 3rd episode began to lure the realistically drawn world of Cherokee City, Georgia, further into King's familiar supernatural territory. And it is. I'm absolutely hooked on it, and I can't recommend it enough. There's an actor playing one of the leading parts called Ben Mendelsohn. He's an Australian actor, though you'd never believe it. His American accent seems impeccable to my ear. Again, what do I know? And it is it's directed and stars another favourite actor of mine, Jason Bateman, and who indeed plays Terry Maitland. So I'm actually hooked on that, and I'm looking at it from an interesting point of view, because having read the book, I was thinking, well, will I be interested in seeing the adaptation? You know, sometimes you are, sometimes you aren't. Well, so far I absolutely am, but I would recommend that you get the book first, because it's a terrific read. And where might you get that book if you were looking for it?
Well, it's up to you, but I will break your kneecaps if you don't get it from Kobo, who very kindly sponsored this podcast. Head over to kobo.com, and if you use the promo code CRIME at the checkout, if you've not used Kobo before, you get 90% off of any book you like, and you can read that just using a normal free Kobo mobile app. You don't need to pay for an e-reader or anything like that, although they are excellent. If you've used your Crime promo code, you can use the promo code PARTNERS to get 40% off of a selection of ebooks from Kobo. The link is in the show notes for those. And I'm told we have a special offer coming soon from Kobo, an additional 3rd offer for our 3rd year of Kobo sponsorship, so that you can get some money off of Kobo audiobooks as well. We are still finalising the details on that, but there we go.
The committee room here at Partners on Crime, this high-powered corporate sort of machine that we have here is working on these contracts on an hourly basis. So okay, well, that's great. Well, that's lovely.
Speaking of machines,
yes,
Alison Flood, the only person in Britain who seems to write more words in a week than I do, has popped up in The Guardian with an article about the former deputy leader of the Labour Party, Tom Watson, who stepped down just before the general election in December here in the UK. He has quit Parliament over its brutality. Sorry, you were going to...
No, I was going to say he has stepped down, but he was half the man he was.
Quite literally, yes. He quit Parliament over its brutality, and is now co-writing a thriller called The House with historical novelist Imogen Robertson. We don't have many details about it at the moment. He has said it will explore the themes that lubricate our political system: ambition, failure, trust and betrayal, and introduce its readers to heroes and villains engaged in a struggle for fame, power and revenge. Sounds to me like they've just chosen a name for it and not actually plotted it yet.
Well, maybe he's got a bit of time. He's a busy man, but I mean, I say he's half the man he was when he stepped down, because as many of us know, he discovered that he had type 2 diabetes a while back, and set about correcting that, which he's been thankfully hugely successful at doing.
He's lost a phenomenal amount of weight.
I'm not sure there's not another book, the Tom Watson diet book, or whatever, but I mean the transformation in him is quite extraordinary. And I saw an interview with him a couple of weeks ago, and he was it's a fascinating man, I think. So,
I think the Tom Watson diet book would be quite short, actually. I think it probably boils down to spend 4 years working with Jeremy Corbyn. And that's probably,
we're not political on this show.
That's probably done the job for him.
We are very even-handed in our political approach. But yes, no, I think it's fascinating. Well, good. Yeah, I look forward to reading Tom Watson. Who's his co-writer?
Imogen Robertson, historical novelist. I mean, he won't be the first to write, to be the first ex-politician to write books. So Geoffrey Archer resigned from Parliament in 1974 when he was declared bankrupt, and wrote some fairly average novels after that.
Oh, that's a bit harsh. It's just his way of actually wreaking revenge on the establishment.
Yes, he's still trying. And Michael Dobbs, who wrote House of Cards, of course, was a Tory MP beforehand. Other thriller-writing politicians include Labour MP Chris Mullin, who, of course, wrote A Very British Coup in 1982.
Of course he did, yes.
About a radical Labour Prime Minister being taken down by the banking and media elite. And the Tory Douglas Hurd wrote a book called Scotch on the Rocks about a paramilitary wing of the SNP taking over Fort William. Meanwhile, it says here, Anne Widdecombe's effort, The Clematis Tree, was judged by her former Conservative colleague Edwina Currie to be the product of a perceptive but warped mind. Meanwhile, Currie herself has written 6 novels. And it says here, of course, there is Iain Duncan Smith, whose The Devil's Tune sold just 18 copies in its first week, with reviewers marvelling that his prose ranges from Lumpen to berserkly lush. Anne Widdecombe was more complimentary, saying there is much in print that is a great deal worse.
So, politicians, I suppose there's a certain health minister around who writes historical novels as well, isn't there? That name.
No.
That's fascinating. Well, that's what politicians do in their downtime.
Yeah.
Not that they haven't. It's what they do when they've obviously retired.
Yeah. I love the fact that Iain Duncan Smith's book sold 18 copies in its first week.
I don't know why that is so strange.
My first book did more than that in its first week, and I wasn't the leader of the opposition at any point in my life, as far as I'm aware.
No. Well, there we are. You see, it just shows that the political platform doesn't necessarily increase sales of books.
No. And good. Peter May, who has sold a few more than 18 books, he sold millions in fact and had his work translated to 32 languages, has hailed the late William McIlvenney. You're coughing a lot today.
Yes, I'm sorry listeners, it's terrible. I can't get rid of this cough, and it's driving me absolutely nuts.
I can't get rid of this co-presenter, but there we are.
Well, yeah, you can get someone who doesn't actually hack throughout the broadcast. I'm going to stop coughing now. If I cough one more time,
we end it there. Should we just stop the episode as soon as you cough? If you cough again, I'm stopping it.
Oh, you see, yes,
that's
yes. Very, very good at suspense, this man, isn't he?
All I'm saying is Adrian Hobart doesn't cough.
Yeah.
Peter May has hailed the late William McIlvenney.
A tear has started to roll down my cheek.
Quiet. Has hailed the late William McIlvenney as a catalyst for the staggering success of crime fiction in Scotland.
I'm thinking of just leaving now.
In recent years, the likes of May, Ian Rankin, Stuart McBride, and Val McDermid, allied to the emergence of popular authors such as Lynn Anderson, James Oswald, Denise Mina, Chris Brookmyre, and Louise Welsh, etc., says the Press and Journal. And Peter May has written extensively about the Western Isles, it says here, as part of his Lewis trilogy, with Detective Inspector Jack Laidlaw. First appeared in 1977. He said William McIlvenney... McIlvenney wrote Jack Laidlaw. You're putting me off with this blooming coughing of yours.
I'm trying to. I haven't coughed, you've noticed, so that's why I'm still
I know.
sitting here.
This is why I'm on edge. I'm getting ready to just stop the recording the second you do.
Got a complexion like a ripe plum, trying to keep this cough in, but there we go.
You've been called worse.
I have.
Peter May said that William McIlvenney's Detective Inspector Jack Laidlaw, who appeared in the first of 3 novels, was a big influence on him and Scottish crime fiction in general. He said William blazed the trail back in the 70s by bringing a literary element to his crime fiction, and he gave everybody else permission to go down the same road, which helps explain why the genre is flourishing. And he said so in an interview to promote his latest book, A Silent Death. This is Peter May, not William McIlvenney. And A Silent Death features a character who is deaf and blind, and the writer carried out extensive research before starting work on it. Very interesting story, somewhat ruined there.
No, something really interesting. Yeah, it's quite interesting. Would you like to step down literary lane? But yeah, okay. Have we got another? Have we got a slightly more interesting? Well, that was interesting.
We've got a couple. We've got Mindhunter, the Netflix series, is in limbo apparently.
Yes.
They've done 2 series. And apparently there's been no movement from Netflix regarding a potential 3rd series. Last month, Netflix let the options of the cast lapse, further raising the possibility we may have seen the last of Mindhunter, which is based on a true crime book.
Yes, I've seen both of those series, and it's very, very, very well done.
It was left open for a 3rd, but there might not be one, is the issue there. And another interesting thing I saw in Forbes India this week, which of course I'm a regular subscriber to.
That's your Huddersfield Gazette or whatever it is.
Yes, it is, yeah. British theatre director Millie Still has been adapting The Mirror Cracked from Side to Side in India, which starts on January the 30th, touring around India. She's a director and choreographer. She was never a big fan of Agatha Christie in her youth, apparently, until she was offered to direct a production of The Mirror Cracked from Side to Side. In the play, Miss Marple is Miss Mystery. It has been adapted quite heavily for Indian audiences, and characters have been changed, and culturally it has been updated and shifted heavily for an Indian audience, which is something I found very interesting, actually.
Oh, well, I mean, that's yes. Well, a friend of mine, Denise Sylvia, has just taken her production of taken The Mousetrap to a tour of India, which was hugely successful. And she produces The Mousetrap in London and on tour and worldwide, actually. And so she took it over there. They had a fantastic time. There's a huge appetite for Agatha Christie in India, and it went down terribly well. Which reminds me, of course, this past week was 100 years since the first Poirot.
Was it?
Yes.
Of course, yeah, 1920.
Yes, incident.
Blimey.
Yes, that was it. So that was celebrated, and I was listening to the Graham Norton show on Sunday, and he was interviewing her great-grandson, who of course runs the Agatha Christie estate, and talking to members of the cast of Witness of the Prosecution, which is running hugely successfully at County Hall. It was Witness being Agatha Christie's personal favourite amongst her plays. And of course has been done hugely successfully in film and on television more recently by the BBC. But there's a site-specific production at the County Hall, the ex-London County Hall on the South Bank, which uses one of the main committee rooms as the court, and it's proven to be hugely successful.
You are in the court while you're watching this courtroom drama.
Yes, and members of the audience, you can buy a ticket which says you are part of the jury. I don't know whether you pay a little bit more, or does that come under bribery, or I don't know. I mean, or whatever.
It's not real. I think
you pay. Yes, you pay a little bit extra, maybe, or maybe not. But you can actually choose to be a juror. So you decide the fate. So the question came up on Graham Norton: does the verdict ever go against the verdict of the player? They said no, never. It's always absolutely sort of the same verdict
until we turn up.
Until we turn up.
Ruin it for
to sabotage. But there it is, Witness of the Prosecution, live on London West End stage now, and so well worth buying tickets for that if you haven't already seen it.
Yes. Well, I think I'm actually pretty much there. I was going to say there was an article in Lad Bible this week, of all places, where a crime scene cleaner revealed what it's like to really clean up after a murder. It was... The thing that grabbed me was that he shares this chap whose name is...
Still trying not to cough over here.
Is Neil Smither.
Smither.
Which, I remembered. He shares before and after shots of places he's cleaned up on Instagram, and it seems as though the public can't get enough. The grimmer, the better, it says here, which I think is very odd. I mean, the after shots, maybe. The before shots, perhaps not quite massively sensitive. He says, I think death is a kind of the last frontier, so to speak. Nobody knows anything about it, he explains. Very few people are exposed to any kind of scene, like the kind I see, and everyone kind of wants to know how it happens and why it happens and what's next, and we're able to give them a little picture into each one.
Oh, God, that
Make
sounds
of that
very
what you will.
Well, I don't know whether I like that.
No, I don't.
Which is bizarre because, of course, we sort of read about these things or whatever, but actually seeing the real thing is sort of...
Especially if you're doing it on like an Instagram type thing and you're just posting up pictures of, grisly murder scenes and then...
Well, that's not very nice.
Now have a look at what a jar of Sillet Bang did. It's a bit, it's a little bit, I don't know.
No, well, I'm not entirely convinced about that, but at least it stopped me coughing.
Yes. Well, as soon as you stop coughing, then maybe you've croaked it and you'll be the next crime scene cleanup.
What's happened is people listen to this and they probably... I think I haven't coughed, but someone will phone up and say, yes, you actually coughed precisely 3 more times after you said you weren't going to cough. Yes,
you let one out, and maybe we've been deaf to it. I've not noticed them because they're... but there we are.
Well, that's it. So I suppose the only way we can really end this conversation is...
Partners in Crime was presented by Adam Croft and Robert Daws and produced by Adam Croft. The theme tune was by the Caesareans. The Partners in Crime logo and imagery were designed by Stuart Beisch. Partners in Crime is sponsored by Kobo, your favourite local bookshop, perfected.